Will the meeting of the Federal Way School Board Board of Directors meeting please come to order? I'd like the board members to introduce themselves.
Hiro Shieto, Director, District 5.
Claire Wilson, Director, District 2.
Jeffrey McAnalloy, Director.
Carol Gregory, President.
Director Danny Peterson.
Sally McLean, Superintendent.
Okay, flag salute. Mark, how about leading us in the flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move that the Board of Education approve the meeting agenda of July 22nd, 2014 as submitted.
I second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carried. And we're moving now to the consent agenda. Are there changes?
Madam President, I move that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda of July 22, 2014 as submitted.
All second.
Are there changes to the, Sally, are there changes that you want to make to this?
To the consent agenda?
Are the contracts on here?
No.
They're separate? They were on a separate document, that's why I was wondering.
The document 3A was modified to remove two contracts that were originally included. One was for the portable lease agreement for the portable installations at Federal Way High School as we rebuild that school. And the second contract that was removed was with the Atlantic Education Partners. So they are not on 3A, so there's no.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. There were modifications made to consent agenda item 3A to remove two contracts that were originally listed. One was for KCDA for the leasing of the portables, and the other was for the Atlantic Education Partners. Both of those were removed, and you were resent amended 3As yesterday.
Is there a second to the motion?
So are we seconding that change?
That was already.
I seconded it, so, yeah.
She's just telling us what
No.
the content is.
I had
Okay.
two things I wanted to touch on in the consent agenda. The
Okay.
first one is I wanted to thank the PTSA over at FWAPA for $16,000 donation there. And, you know, you just reminded again of just the partnership that happens in each school with the parents and that's obviously a great amount of money given there to help out the school there, so we're grateful for that. Also excited to see the PWEA student trips for Ghana and Ecuador in there. As I was walking up today, we had a former Federal Way school district student that actually just got a recent phone call from WEA actually asking him if he'd be an ambassador to go to China. And so he's actually here. He's now in college now, but actually getting his passport today in order to help them with helping chaperone and help students that are going to be traveling from different schools around the country to China this year to doing service acts around the world. So pretty cool partnership, and yeah, I'm glad to see that we're still heavily involved in continuing to get students and teachers involved in the great work going around globally.
Any other discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. Okay, public comments. I have one from Nancy Combs. No, I don't. No, I have two. Is Nancy here?
She's here, but she said she
Oh.
was going to go first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But I didn't have that first.
Would you like me to switch
To what?
to someone else first?
If they want, I don't care.
Oh, Chris indicated you
I
were.
know what.
Oh, you're okay. Let's go ahead.
Well, Welcome, Board of Education. I just want to know if anything's been done about the big school buses. They go through Federal Way like we don't exist, and we pay the taxes. The big school bus comes off of Dash Point Road to 16th to 304th by Adelaide School. There's no signs by Adelaide, and the parents just zip down there. I have been there before we were a city, and all my kids grew up there, went to Adelaide and Federal Way and Decatur. In fact, my granddaughter is now a teacher in Tacoma. She went to Decatur. But I don't think it's right that we have worked 20 to 40 years at Weyerhaeuser, Virginia Mason, and all, and then we can't retire or sleep ever in the morning. Those big school buses come down off of Dash Point Road, and they turn on 16th to 304th. And there's 4 or 5 kids they pick up all winter long, and it's raining, and it's dark. But that big bus should come down and go into Adelaide, where they pick up those 4 or 5 kids safely and under lights in the porch. I love kids. In fact, I had a bunch of them coming by for kites yesterday. And I have lived there too long before we were a city. And I think it's time we did something for safety. That 4-way stop is such a bad corner. And they have had side-by-side car races down the hill across 21st to the next block. I have pictures of how it tore up 2 yards. Nobody said a word. Just like down by the Dairy Queen, a driver was killed down there. And there have been 2 deaths on 21st Avenue coming around that corner up there, the curve. Another lady this last year came on 312, turned and went, they park in the street instead of their driveway, and she went right into the back of one of those cars. I want to see something done. They don't do anything with those big buses. 6:45 in the morning, and we're not allowed to sleep. I'm sorry. In Palisades, the buses go 10, 25, 35 miles an hour down that winding road. What if a deer or a dog runs out in front of that bus? Would you let your kid ride that bus? Not me. So please do something for safety for our kids. I had 4. They're big business here in Federal Way, and like I said, one is a teacher now in Tacoma from Decatur. So I'm proud of her.
Could I ask you just a quick question?
Sure.
Specifically, is your concern the buses? Is your concern the traffic stop, the way it's constructed? I'm a little unclear.
Both.
Both, okay.
The buses come down from Adelaide and they turn up 21st at 6:45 in the morning. The lights from the buses there, the motors are running, and they don't pick up anybody. All the way from 304th, 305th, 307th, and 312th.
Okay.
So
Okay.
why are they getting paid? They shouldn't if they don't pick up anybody. And
Well.
at 6:45, they can go out the other way.
Thank you. Woody, on.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Uri, and I'm a Vice President TJ High School this year. And I'm retired now, but I spent about probably 40 plus years in education. I taught the high school 5 years, and I spent many years in community colleges as a faculty member, department head, dean, and the college president, and I'm retired. Also, all that kind of, I guess, volunteer services, like Lions Club, Rotary Club, and I was also 7 years as North Central Washington Superintendent advisory committee. So we work about 30 district superintendents in North Central Washington. Based on their experience, I was involved in hiring a lot of people, I guess, including teachers and administrators and superintendents and college president also. I guess what I'm saying, I understand that you are start searching for a new superintendent. What I'd like to recommend, you establish, I don't know what you want to call, but kind of superintendent search committee. Hopefully they consist of not just all teachers or district staff members, but it is a good idea, have parents, PTA members, and somebody district office, including your teacher and support staff. It is also probably a good idea have just at least one possibly high school student. Sometimes you may hear, well, high school students now old enough to really give you any kind of advice, but just that hear about student side, that helps the committee. So anyway, just basically, I just want to see if you form such committee for superintendents, the committee members, including kind of, all, not just the teacher or the administrators, but just about, also I just want to suggest that try make that, don't make the even number, but in case. But also, I seen a few committee members.
You got 30 seconds. You're okay.
Sometimes they make the committee so big, you don't actually just cannot move forward, as the way you want. If you want to make that like 30 members or 100 members, but it is probably a good idea. Anywhere from 7 to probably about 11, maybe 15 members, something like that. But this depends. Okay, I think my time is up. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. And let me explain where we are in the process. We simply, at this meeting, are going to get information on what we did the previous time. But I think that for me, I know that this will be a process. I hope we will have a process that fully involves the community, and I believe that's where the rest of the board is, but they could speak for themselves. But I think that's a very critical part of our work and something that I think we fully intend to do.
I would totally agree, and I so appreciate you taking time to come, and I also appreciate your word around student voice, and student voice is critical. And I think that at any level, students have something of value to share, and so in my mind, they would be an equal partner with whatever committee would be put together. And I also agree with you number-wise and also representation-wise. It really needs to be broad and reflective of the community and also of the many stakeholders that we have. So on the agenda, clearly it's, for me, information, and that there's been nothing that we've done or we've had any conversation as a board about even how we are thinking individually or as a group about moving forward. So thank you so much for coming, because I think it's an important conversation to have, and we need to think about how we get voice, even if people aren't on a committee, how we create opportunities so that we clearly are looking for someone who's reflective of the broadest groups in our community. Thanks.
And I will also, again, say that I agree that we need to have a committee that includes as many from the community as we can, but size is also important. So I appreciate your comments today, Woody.
Any further? Okay, we'll move on to superintendent comments.
At this point in time, in the middle of July, I know we are waiting to receive our MSP and HISP scores from OSPI and are preparing to respond to the results of that single assessment and the impacts it has on the school district in terms of implementing the No Child Left Behind requirements. So in the next couple of weeks, we'll be fairly busy validating that data and preparing a variety of communication pieces to be sent to the homes. Today's meeting is unusual, and I know President Gregory will talk about that to the extent that we are providing some background information to the board related to two significant topics. One is obviously some primary work for the board next year as you engage in a superintendent search process, since this was last done 4 years ago with an entirely different board composition. We wanted Diane Turner and Chuck Christensen will be talking to you about the process that the prior board used, and we tried to provide you with some fairly detailed information in preparation of your retreat. I also will be attempting to provide a fairly high-level overview of a number of projects that are currently underway in the district, many of which are mandated, again, in preparation of the board retreat, knowing that each of the board members have their own interest, and we want to make sure we are listening to those and finding ways to help prioritize that with the rest of the work that's occurring. I believe that there is an agenda topic today that we would probably be best deferring in regards to what is the legislation was called 1418. It's also referred to as open doors or dropout re-engagement, and that given some of the potential policy impacts in 1418, I might recommend to you that we defer that to a work study while we're hopeful to provide some expanded services to our students who are no longer in school. We recognize that the information, the process of sharing information and making decisions has left some holes in the knowledge. So I would suggest that you might want to consider moving that to a work study. And at this point in time, that concludes my comments.
Is there any action or discussion of the board on moving 1418 to a work study? Anybody want to make a motion or removing that from the agenda?
Madam President, at this time, I would ask that we remove that from agenda based on the recommendation from Superintendent McLean and move it to a work study.
Is there a
I'll second.
Moved and seconded, discussion? Seeing none?
Actually, I would actually wouldn't mind a presentation on it, and the fact that if we have the information here, we have the PowerPoint here, we have the time today to hear from it. I don't know what, unless there's something that would prevent just being able to get exposed to what is that program, how it would benefit Federal Way schools, and actually be maybe a preamble to what a work study might contain, or we might find it adequate enough for us to maybe ask some more prompting questions moving forward, and if we would want to approve something like that. So that would be my recommendation. Just go ahead and let the presentation go as it is on the agenda. So
Further discussion?
I guess the question I would have is if there's a vote to be taken, I'm not prepared at all to make a vote, but if there's information that would be helpful as far as Director Peterson said, I'd be happy to hear it, but I'm also not at a place where I'm ready to, I just don't have a frame or enough information to know about making any kind of final decision. So I'm just not prepared for any kind of a vote.
And I would agree with you, Director Wilson. I'm not prepared to make a vote today. I don't have a problem with going through the presentation, but I need further information and better understanding of what we're doing before we, the email we got last week was a big surprise to me. I had no idea that we were moving in that direction. I know there was things discussed in the work study, but I didn't know we were moving to the point where we were ready to open doors for a new school. So I'm not prepared today to take a vote on that. I need a lot more information and understanding, but if Mr. Blauser wants to do his presentation, I don't have any problem with that.
President Gregory, I if I may, I agree with Superintendent McLean. Excuse me. I believe I can give you more information in the interim between now and the next work study on this information, that when we get to that work study, there's a lot of depth to this that I want to make sure that we fully understand. Today's presentation, I think, would be appropriate if we were at that decision-making point. And if you're not there, I'd rather spend some time really going in depth and making sure that everybody, and I can give you some more information prior to that, because I believe we're having our next work study within the next 2 weeks, I believe. Do we know when our next work study? So giving that opportunity to give you more information.
Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of the motion to,
Actually, so if I could just clarify, so are you saying that your presentation today would not be, unless we're ready to make a decision today, is not geared towards?
It's more pointed towards a particular.
Okay, perfect. That helps me out. Thank you.
okay, all in favor of the motion to move 1418 programs report to the next work study, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. Okay, we're at 1415 projects. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, we went around. School board comments. Anyone have a comment to make? Hiroshi?
I'll start. First of all, I'd like to thank the Federal Way Mirror. I've been sending letters to the editor, and I've seen a couple of those published, and I think it opens a door for communication with the community, and so I hope it's something that we can leverage and will increase the amount of community engagement, because I think this board does want to go in that direction from what I understood. As part of that engagement process, I've opened up a Facebook page, HETO FWPS, and I've posted all the letters to the editor there and any comments that I make on others, just to have an opportunity for people to make comments and provide input. I hope to leverage the Twitter site that the Federal Way Public Schools has put together, so I'll be talking to Deb a little bit about how I might be able to do that. I'm also compiling an email list of folks that have contacted me, have been referred to me, and also those that had applied for this position to see if they wanted to stay engaged and provide input. So I'm hoping that these will open some doors along with various community events. I plan on going to the City Vision meeting in August. Will give me additional insights. I've only been on the board for a month now, but it's been interesting to see the various concerns from various perspectives. Also, I've been set up on the email system, and it is heto@fwps.org if people want to contact me there. So I'm looking forward to working with the community and the board.
Thank you. Claire?
I guess I want to say I also appreciate communication from the Mirror, but I do want to say I was a little alarmed yesterday at 5 o'clock to see breaking news that our meeting was suddenly at 10 o'clock here in the city chambers. And want to say that this is my third July, and every July our meetings have been at 10 o'clock. So I just want to make sure as we communicate that we're making sure we're communicating sometimes the appropriate things, and I appreciate the highlighting that we're having a meeting, but I also want to make sure that people understand this is not a change in practice, and this is, we met across the street the last 2 years. The change may be that we're here. So I do want to make sure that we've got those open lines of communication, but I also sometimes worry when the information that's communicated isn't necessarily accurate. I also want to say I just got back from a incredibly intensive 4-day professional learning opportunity through my work, where I had a chance to really, in my mind, put a lot of things together as far as the work that we're doing in Federal Way, and it was called the International Visible Learning Conference in San Diego, where all of the leaders in education reform, not only from across the U.S., but from New Zealand and Australia and from the UK, and a lot of the other places in the world that are working as hard as we are on how it is that we meet the needs of kids, have all come together and really created a space for professional learning, and all 47 out of the 50 states were represented there, as well as many countries. But the learning, again, was that we're on the right track, and as much as change is difficult, we need to change, and we need to change our approaches to children. We need to look at that with an individualized lens, and we are also on the right track in our grading, and although a difficult conversation, are further along than many people. But clearly, the message is we need to be meeting the needs of individual kids, and you do that by making sure you can see and understand how kids learn and what kids are learning, so that they can scaffold learning to move on to the next step. So it was very much of a, I don't even know what the word is. It supported all of my thinking and all of the work that we're doing here. It also means that we need to be, again, incredibly communicative, and we need to make sure people understand not only what we're doing, but why we're doing what we're doing as it impacts their kids and our community. Thanks.
So I just have one thing. I just want to acknowledge that about 2 weeks ago, we received. Oh, I turned it off. So just one thing. About 2 weeks ago, everybody that I think K through 8 received their family and community partnership brochure. I would encourage everybody to look at that and understand what the opportunities are to be involved in as a family or a community engagement. To make sure that you know where you fit in and where you can help. And I appreciate Teresa's work to make sure that all of us receive that. So thank you, Teresa.
I would like to announce, and maybe this is already on the website, but the board will be in retreat on the 31st of July at the ESC office. It is a public meeting. We haven't set the exact time, but it'll be approximately 9 to 4. So if you're interested in watching us retreat for a few hours, that's the time to do it. Thank you.
I don't have any comments, so thank you.
Okay. Let's move on to 1415 projects. Sally McLean.
So if you'll allow me to return to the podium, I have a PowerPoint, surprise, surprise, to share with you.
Thank you.
So what I just wanted to provide an overview of the various activities that leadership is engaged in as we, either in terms of continuation of projects that have been started in this year or prior years, or new projects that are underway as we move forward. And I'm not going to, if I try to elaborate on each of these, we will be here for hours. But this framework is provided and was created during a planning day that the upper leadership participated in late June, to give us some idea of what a school district is challenged with, so to speak, in terms of responding to state and federal mandates and our own interests in changing educational opportunities for students. And this is just really to provide a framework of what kinds of things happen even in a year when we are intentionally not implementing lots of change. There are still probably 200 projects in here that are underway, each of which have some impact on our staff, our teachers, our students, and our broader community. And so these are currently divided by quote-unquote department. Obviously, our departments aren't in silos. You'll see some overlapping work as we go through things. And I have some caveats that indicate that this doesn't represent everything that we're doing, because I'm missing some key elements from some certain departments that were not able to be with us the end of June. This work doesn't necessarily reflect the regular and routine workloads like hiring 150 new teachers, paying staff every month, those kinds of things. It's not prioritized, and it should be considered a living document. And what I would hope to do for you prior to your July 31st board retreat day is to take this and redistribute it around the 4 global ends that we have, so that you can see how this work is tied into the ends. Again, I would expect some overlap because changing student achievement changes graduation rates. But to the best of my ability, we'll try to look at it from that framework rather than just from a departmental perspective. Obviously, in the oh, great. Okay, so we're gonna have fun with this. I didn't think I had any animation in any of these slides. As a district, we will be very intentional about our focus on equity for students as we move through this year. That will be the theme of our work at the administrative retreat. It will be the theme of the September 2nd all-school kickoff date. We are fortunate that the National Race and Pedagogy Conference will be hosted this year in Tacoma. That will give us an opportunity to refresh some of our learnings, and we are currently in the process of hiring for the Director of Equity and Achievement with interviews scheduled for this week. Obviously, the superintendent attempts to provide leadership and direction for the district, facilitates school board and policy governance, develops measurable ends goals. I see that as a primary work product that needs to be tackled. Again, I would be hopeful that I will be presenting the board with some draft measurable goals for their consideration or beginning conversations on July 31st. We've all talked about the need to create opportunities for authentic community engagement. I'm hopeful after July 31st we'll have a better idea of what we want that to look like. I intend to be visible in the community in our schools. I intend to assist the board as needed with the superintendent search. Obviously, our grading committee work continues. Our learner first work continues, and as I mentioned in my comments earlier, beginning to, we can't really even understand the impacts of being under the sanctions of No Child Left Behind until we start getting test results in the next couple of weeks. Rebuilding Federal Way High School is a huge project and will take a dedicated amount of resources. And then we have some key departments that are being reorganized, including Human Resources, the Support Service Center, the Business Office, and I should include Communications in here also. We know communications is, will continue to be working on changing the way we distribute information to our survey. Part of that may come out directly by the last item on this list, which talks about a communications survey by audience and trying to understand where and how people want to get news and developing a strategy around that information. The Teaching for Learning department, not surprisingly, since we're talking about teaching for learning and student achievement, has 3 slides of work here, ranging from curriculum resources to professional development for our second year of Common Core to the next gen science standards, and that list goes on and on. The impacts of Race to the Top continue to be burdensome. Hopefully we'll see some positive results. We know that the high cap legislation and that implementation is still in its infancy and needs to be, additional conversations need to occur. You'll see other some common themes, like here you also see year 2 of Learner First. You see the moving from AMO to AYP, which is the acronym for moving from annual measurable objectives to adequate yearly progress, which is required under NCLB. The Self-ID and the TPEP work is in its second year as we gear up for next year. We have some new positions in Teaching for Learning, which will helpfully help distribute some of the workload. We have Smarter Balanced, which is once again a change. So if you think about when No Child Left Behind was implemented in 2000-2001, the state tests for measuring adequate yearly progress or annual yearly progress on No Child Left Behind was the WASL. The WASL was replaced with the MSP and the HISP and end of course assessments. That's now being replaced by Smarter Balance, which requires all of our students to take the test online. So that has impacts in lots of ways. Something here to be thinking about, while it's not a 14-15 project, we know we are slated or hope to be slated for a math adoption in 16-17. As you look at supporting our schools directly, elementary and K-8s, you'll see that we have the Executive Director of Elementary Schools supports 23 principals with the related TPEP evaluation. We have, out of those 23 principals, we have 2 that are brand new. We have 3 that are starting their second year. There is an ongoing need to coordinate with the Director of Leadership Development as that TPEP work moves back into a specific director position. As you know, we've added elementary assistant principals. Some of the things that we've talked about, Learner First, we've talked about PBIS and trying to continue to grow that behavior intervention system, Smarter Balance, Common Core. Again, you'll see some of those common themes that stretch through and impact all of the work that we do. In secondary schools, obviously, supporting the Life Prep Flex Academy will be part of the Executive Director of Secondary Schools work. Looking at a common high school schedule for preparing for implementing Core 24, trying to understand what emerging schools really means to us now that we're going back under NCLB continues to be conversations for us. Next gen science standards, race to the top, intervention, credit retrieval, second page. Again, I think this is important for us to understand is that out of our 4 comprehensive high schools, we have accumulated 3 years of experience as principal in those 4 comprehensive high schools. So we have strong leadership there, but they're young and growing. We know that we're working with our early warning indicator system in conjunction with credit retrieval and intervention to ensure that we are keeping more kids on track to graduate on time. TPEP continues to be a common theme, and obviously we'll look forward to an opportunity to talk about the allowable 14-18 programs in the state of Washington. The Deputy Superintendent, Mark Davidson, will continue to support Student Support Services, which has a focus on PBIS. That department is also transitioning in its leadership from a co-directorship to a single director, and our Special Education Services is implementing another component of the EduPoint system, moving off of our current IEP and reeval system to the EduPoint IEP and reeval system. And of course, anytime you do a major software change, that always has an impact on people because screens aren't the same, clicks aren't the same. So we look forward to that first year of implementation in Student Support Services. Security obviously continues to be a focus as we look at the implementation of the camera plan funded through the Levy and OSPI safety grant. Mark will continue to have a role in preparing the data for ENS3 and will be supportive of the superintendent in terms of legislative and community presence. Family and community partnerships continues to grow. We're excited to be able to add 8 more family liaisons, along with the connection with our school outreach coordinators at middle schools for our with communities and schools. We will continue to refine and develop measurable goals around ENS4 with the parent survey. Technology services obviously is really kind of one of our backbones. In addition to the tech levy, technology services helps, which is supporting some of our one-to-one pilots at Nautilus and Sahali and at Life Prep Flex. We have some race to the top implications in IT. And we know that, again, while not necessarily a 14-15 project, that our current tech levy expires in 2016. So it is time to start thinking about and planning for what that tech levy renewal might look like. We have some challenges in our technology department in terms of being able to staff. Ron has had 2 positions open for more than a year. And we are not able to attract a candidate pool of sufficient skills with the compensation levels that we have. Although I'm hopeful with Microsoft's recent announcement of laying off 18,000 people that perhaps that pool will look more available. But that is certainly having an impact in terms of our capacity when you have a very tightly staffed department that is down virtually 10% of their staff, maybe 15% of their staff. And of course, Smarter Balanced has impacts for technology in terms of ensuring that we have enough network capacity to support the testing of 22,000 students. Human Resources, of course, has had a busy year finalizing and implementing negotiated agreements for our Federal Way Educational Association and our educational support personnel and our athletic coaches. The last time those contracts were open was 5 years ago, so it's a new, it was long enough ago that it all feels new again, and I'm pleased to report that we have tentative agreements, and hopefully we'll have contracts for you to approve in August. Obviously, one of the key positions that we are looking to recruit and hire is an assistant superintendent of human resources. That job is also posted with interviews tentatively scheduled for next week. We have some job descriptions that probably need to be updated, particularly as the data secretary's job has changed, both in terms of our internal reporting needs and in terms of ongoing additions of reporting needs from OSPI. And then we have TPEP and potential school calendar implications. Business Services is looking at changes to healthcare pooling, self-insurance for dental insurance, continuing to support training for new staff. The budget process we anticipate will be different for the 15-16 budget year, because it'll be the beginning of a new biennial process with the legislature, and we are expecting the legislature to address 2 key components of the McCleary decision. One is around staff compensation, and the other is around levy funding as we go through this biennial process, which could have significant impacts for us. As we look at building Federal Way High School, we will have to be watching that capital projects cash flow closely with the possibility of doing a bond sale next summer for that final piece of the bond authorization that was approved by the voters in 2007. And there are race to the top implications in the business office and other things that will continue to be supported. The Support Service Center, under the direction of Cindy Wendland, will be finishing off a couple of state match projects, most specifically working with Lake Haven and the City of Federal Way to create that Illahee sewer connection. We have 29 projects actually occurring this summer that are significant in nature, including portables and heating and ventilating systems.
We are driven to create a roof replacement schedule, an interior and exterior paint schedule, do some field and upgrade tracks at Decatur, and a number of things like that as they work through Support Service Center. And last but not least, transportation will be looking at some unusual routing opportunities as we look at having to move our Federal Way High School students to different sites for their after-school athletic activities. And No Child Left Behind also has impacts in regards to transportation. So again, that's just a really high-level overview with the caveats that I mentioned. This is not a complete list. There may be some things in here that particularly piqued your interest that you want some more information around, and that might help on July 31st maybe frame our discussions about where we want work studies or where we want to develop some deeper understanding about the projects that are in play for 14-15. So again, this was just provided as information, as sort of a baseline for your deeper conversations next week. Questions?
Questions?
I made a few notes, and I'm hoping that it's okay if I tell you what my little notes were.
Sure,
So,
absolutely.
One is you talked about equity related to the focus on equity related to students, and I'm interested in what kind of work we might be doing around equity related to our own leadership, and how equitable practices, although they may be in policy, may not necessarily be able to be implemented in a equitable and just way because of our own stuff. And I'm just kind of wondering, from the leadership level on down, we do need to look at it, how we're working with students, but I'm also interested in what our work might be with our own biases and things that we might come with as leaders. So that's one thing I might add. The second thing is I'm hoping that as we have conversation that we are communicating our pre-K through 12, and in some of the conversations I know I see with our negotiated agreements, we're reflecting early learning, but maybe some of the other things around communication surveys and those kinds of things to make sure that we're including all of our families, even if they may not be in our K-12 programs, and that may or may not be happening. I also am interested in the math adoption that you spoke about in 16-17, and again would be interested in having exploration looking across systems pre-K to college, and I don't know whether that's in the realm of what we've done as a district before, but as we talk about alignment and school readiness for our early learning kids, it would be really important to think about how we're getting those children ready before they start kindergarten. See, I told you I wrote myself little notes. And the other thing, I guess, in the family community partnerships that I would love to have called out, and I'm certain it's probably on Teresa's mind, but are expanding or enhancing or really are deepening our work with the immigrant and refugee populations that we talked about at the work study. We've done a really nice job with our African American families, also with our Latino Hispanic families, but that we have other families in our district that we need to also focus on. And so I'm hoping we have some strategies and ways the board could support that work happening as we think about our coming years. And then I wanted to know what the School Dude program was.
School Dudes, we have a number of different kinds of software programs.
Oh, is it a software?
Yes, and
Oh.
School Dude is a software program
Okay.
that manages, we do two things with that software. We track our facility rentals with that software program, and we also track work orders with that
Oh, I thought it had
program.
something to do with like with the dads, whatever the.
Right, Watchdogs.
Yeah, like Watchdogs, I thought.
No.
School Dude, I wonder if
Sorry.
it's a new program. Thank
Well,
you.
you know,
Thank
we
you,
do
Sal.
fall into that acronym.
Thanks, Sally.
arena, Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say, say something. I appreciate the caveats too at the beginning too, just about this is a living, working document, and how I appreciate your presentation. That this is something that I think is appropriate and good for July, just as we look at the school year. And I mean, even if we didn't have a retreat, this is helpful for me as a board member just to kind of see what's on the horizon. What are things that we're wrestling with, thinking about, considering, really maybe strongly considering moving forward. I know all this stuff is not set in stone.
Right.
But I definitely had my scribbles as well, and I look forward to sharing those at the retreat and upcoming board meetings. But yeah, this definitely helps me just kind of framework what's going on. So thank you again for your presentation, and it definitely was extensive, and I know it took some time, but it's helpful to us as a board. So thank you again.
It was a great exercise in delegation. Everybody put their list together.
Great job.
Great
Thank
job.
you.
Paula transcribed off the yellow stickies.
Loved it.
So next week, I'd just like some further information on HCP and the decisions we made this year around HCP, the impacts that we have some students that were in HCP that are no longer based on the changes we've made, and how many students are impacted.
What's ACP?
Highly capable. So the highly capable programs, I know that there is legislation around K-12, but I know as a district we made a decision to move this year quicker than the other years. And I can tell you I have an impact in my household of my child that was in HCP and is no longer in HCP. So I'm definitely very interested in how we did this and why we did this, and the things that went away that were in consideration that didn't, based on doing one test now. And so I just want to understand where we're at and how we're going to support those students that have moved out of it, that were in it, and what kind of impacts they have and how many students that impacted.
Okay.
Would that be more appropriate for a work study?
And maybe it is. Maybe it needs to be a work study. Maybe we need to plan a work study around it.
Okay. Okay.
I'm just curious, President Gregory, what your intent is, just because, I know we're starting to share some of our stuff, and it's almost like we're opening Pandora's box right now
Yes.
with all the ideas and stuff, because I know it was just kind of a summary. Are you wanting to, at the retreat, are we going to delve
Yes.
into these topics, or are we just going to discuss what we want for the upcoming school year, for work studies, for board meetings, presentations,
No, what we're
that kind
going
of
to
stuff?
do at the board retreat is look at this list and prioritize where the board wants to generate policy or focus energies, and both the board and the district.
Got it.
Because as you see, this is a huge list.
Absolutely.
And immediately I get worried, because this is only what we know of so far, and every year generates its own new list. And I'm one who says, let's take a serious look at all these items and see what we absolutely believe is going to make a difference for children. And if there are things on here that we don't see as strongly, then let's get them off the list so that we can move forward and give people time to do their jobs. One of the things I see happening in education is everybody is bombarding local school districts with ideas and requirements and no money, and that is scary, because at the same time, we're trying to invest our energies in increasing the academic levels of our students. And sometimes there's a conflict, and there may be times where we have to push back, and this may be the time to have those conversations. I don't think we can do everything, and I think we as a board need to think about that at the retreat.
Okay.
I apologize. I thought that what Superintendent McLean asked was if there were any things that were reflected from what you said that would allow you to bring some things to the retreat. And so I totally misunderstood what you said.
No, that was fine.
No.
Okay.
That was fine.
Because I think that this list is great, but if I say on July 31st, well, I'd like to know a little bit more of this, but I've not been able to say to Superintendent McLean right now, I get this, I didn't add anything to the list, but it's really interesting. I would like to know what the focus is. Then I think it would do us better than continuing to go over the list. So I don't know whether, there might be another way to do that, but if there are some things that we have specific questions about, I think to myself, a whole work study on highly capable, whoa, that's a lot on one thing.
I don't
but
know
anyway.
that we have a whole
Right, so
work
I
study.
guess, anyway, so I really appreciate it as well, Sally, because I don't think I've ever seen it in a single space, and that flip charts mean a lot when they're, put together, and as a board to be able to see that, and as you say, to be able to really look with a critical eye. And so I appreciate the work. I'm certainly not doing anything other than supporting.
Yeah. I don't think what you did at all was inappropriate, because I think what we need to do is give feedback prior to July 31st, because we'll also want to know what it is that's on this list. So if you have questions or issues you want to raise, feel free to get a hold of Sally. That will only give us more information to use at the work study.
And finally, I just want to say thank you for doing this. I mean, this is
Yeah.
part of what I've said for the 7 months I've served. It's hard to understand and get your arms wrapped around it. At least we have a document to understand where we're going now and begin to understand and help prioritize and really work cohesively together with the district as a board. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Hiroshi?
If I could just make a general comment. Since these are public meetings, and this might be kind of a selfish request because I'm having a hard time ramping up on acronyms. You know, I get to HVAC and GPS, probably don't understand ESP the way it probably means.
Yeah.
But I think there should be a protocol or common courtesy that for people that are viewing this or hearing this from the public, that when an acronym is used for the first time, that it be at least explained. I think that should be a common practice, because otherwise I think it's very difficult to follow a lot of these discussions.
I think, is the acronym list on the website too? Might be something we want to consider too, because we do have an acronym list that helps us. But you're absolutely, I think that's a good situation, and if there is one that doesn't make sense, please ask.
Yeah,
Just
Marie.
all of them.
Yeah, Marie actually provided that list to us. That
Yeah.
really helped in December. So maybe if you haven't met with Marie yet, but yeah, absolutely.
Right,
For the
Claire.
community too.
Yeah.
The key thing is the audience is
Right.
probably unable to follow this if they really don't have them explained.
Yeah, absolutely. Claire? Oh. Anything further? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think this is probably some of our most powerful work for next year, is really having an opportunity to look at where we're going and how we're going to get there. It will help us as we move forward and look at possibly developing a strategic plan, as well as the hiring of a superintendent. So if you've got interest or feedback on this list, please get that to us. Thank you. Okay, the next item is the Superintendent Search. And again, we're not making decisions today. This is an information effort to simply explain to the board what we did in the past. And I don't know what else.
Well, President Gregory, members of the board, Superintendent McLean, it is mine and Diane Turner's pleasure to be able to share both some information and some artifacts from our last process, just for you to consider as you're moving forward and thinking about the kind of process you want when you begin your search for the next permanent superintendent position. So you have a notebook in front of you, and I want to pay thanks to Diane and her staff for putting together the material for you today. At first, I would draw your attention to the left flyleaf, and there are just a couple of pull-out things there that I wanted to share with you. So I'm going to just go over a very brief sort of high-level outline of some information, and then Diane will take you through more of the specifics and the notebook itself. So if you look on the left-hand side there was a little outline that generally kind of talked about our process last time. And the board at that time did decide that they wanted to contract with a search firm. So it's certainly the board's prerogative to either run the process themselves, work in coordination with human resources, contract with the search firm. You have a variety of ways that you can consider to move forward. However, as I said, the previous board decided that they wanted to work with the search firm. And so one of the things that needed to happen was to develop some information and criteria on which to select a firm. So you also have in your packet on the left-hand side a request for a proposal that I developed last time that gave some specific information that the board was seeking from the search firm that they wanted to have them put in their proposal, so that when various firms responded, you'd have them responding to specific criteria that you identified, including how they'd go about advertising, their screening process, developing interview questions, interview schedules, criteria for selecting finalists, public communications, which Diane will go over with you in more detail, community involvement processes, community school tour, meetings with district administrators, site visit. That's where the board goes back to that person's current location and talks with people and visits the community. Selection of finalists, criteria for that, final round interviews. Again, thinking about selection and public announcement and communications. And then finally, working with the attorney on contract details, and then the board's official process of making a decision in public at a board meeting. And so a lot of that we asked the search firms to respond to. The board then had an opportunity to look at all the applications that were received and selected 3 finalist firms that best met the criteria that was in the proposal. And then what we did at that time is we had each firm come in and do a presentation and share information about other searches that they had run, and then be available to the board for an interview relative to answering any additional questions that the board might have had about their qualifications, how they would run the process, how they would involve the public, and so forth. And then ultimately made a selection based on the firm that they felt best met the overall criteria. Also, not included in your packet, but what I wanted to make you aware of, I did produce today a 61-page A to Z guide on superintendent search processes, which comes from your association, the Washington School Directors Association. So if each board member would like copies, we'll go ahead and make additional copies for people. But that is available from WASDA, and I think might be a good resource for you also to consider. And then finally, on your left-hand side, I've prepared a list of the top part. It was local to New York, but after that you'll see national superintendent search firms. So as we think about who do we want to send these to, there's a list of resources and references there of people that we can think about contacting as a part of the RFP if the board decides that they want to use the search firm to do their process. And then finally, before I turn it over to Diane, both her office and the HR office has stood ready to assist the board in any way possible. Last time we ended up doing a lot of the coordinating of events and producing a lot of the material that was going to be handed out at public forums and things of that sort. So again, you also have some resources in-house that you can use to help facilitate and support the process. Now to share some of the artifacts and the rest of the notebook with you, I'll turn the next part over to Diane.
Thank you, Chuck. Superintendent McLean, Deputy Superintendent Davidson, Board President Gregory, and board members, you have a notebook before you regarding our 2010 superintendent search. And I have to be honest, that once I took a look at it, I kind of said, wow. I had forgotten all of the activities and the timeline and the planning that really went into making this happen. And Chuck and I were kind of buddies at some point and working closely together. As you can see, and I think probably the best resource, the quick overview of the website gives a great timeline. It says Superintendent Search. It has a logo That particular page gives the fundamental information and the timeline and all the activities that were involved in the superintendent search. Part of what makes this situation different, a lot of our planning in 2010 began with the retirement announcement of Superintendent Murphy. And so a lot of the planning and the timing and the messaging really was a huge piece of launching the superintendent search. Since we're not quite in that situation, you can see that you have different options, of course, depending on what you choose to do. And there were listening sessions, and the board conducted those themselves. And you can also see the messaging strategy and the work that the board went through to really set the stage. There's a media plan involved, and letters to the community, letters to parents, and also the outcome, the articles as they appeared in the news media as well as electronic media regarding the superintendent retirement. So there was a timeline. We began, from what I remember, in April, putting this together in lieu of the announcement of the retirement of our superintendent and moving seamlessly into the superintendent search. And so I wanted to give you this background. If you have any questions, I know you need some time to look through it, but clearly there was a timeline and a process and messaging, and the framework was very clear. And the board set the tone for those activities. And so as you move forward, you will make those decisions based on your needs and your framework. But we wanted to give you this background information so that you'd have some idea of what occurred previously. Do you have any questions, or is there anything?
Can I add
Sure.
just one comment? So as you go through, because I know there was some public comment on that today, is that you'll see that there were a number of places where there was a specific design and opportunity for a community to be involved in the process, from identifying some of the qualities and characteristics that the community was hopeful would be apparent in the selection of the superintendent. And then there were a number of forums and opportunities for people to be able to meet and ask some informal questions. I think the one piece that might have been a little bit weaker that somebody talked about, even though there was some opportunity to collect some information, we could strengthen some of the student input pieces, but I just wanted to be clear that there was a fair amount of community involvement and engagement in the last process as well. So it wasn't like we didn't involve the community, but as we've talked about, can always do more, and we can always do better. And so certainly you have this as kind of a framework just to look at, to think about how you might want to expand opportunities for both students and the community at large to be involved.
So Chuck, just one thing on the superintendent search piece, can you send the URL or send the document PDF and not hard copy to us?
Excuse me.
Okay, all right, that would be great.
I can forward that to you. Okay. Also, just as an FYI, we have an additional tool available to us in terms of reaching our parents and our staff and our students, our K-12 insight tool in terms of surveying, gathering information from a variety of audiences is available to us. We didn't have that last time, so that may also be part of the outreach and gathering information that you might want to consider.
Yeah. Well, thank you, and we certainly wish you good luck in the process. And I know it's one of the most important decisions that you as a new board will have an opportunity to make. And so again, any way that either HR or our community relations staff can assist you in that process, we're happy to help and support you in this important journey in finding a permanent superintendent.
Thank you very much.
Thank
We
you.
obviously are going to need your help. This is a huge task, and it's going to be critical that we do it well.
Yep.
So are there questions for Diane or Chuck? Other than we have a lot to read?
Yes. Thank you so much.
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Yep.
Sorry, I was looking for Mike. Is there anything further to come before the board?
Carol, I was just wondering about the governance process piece that was in our packets, and that there was a point of conversation or just a highlight. I turned my mic off, sorry. I was wondering about the GP 12 that was in our packets, whether that was just a piece of info or what, a change?
I didn't realize it was going to be in the packet, but it was brought to my attention yesterday by Chris that we have an inconsistent statement in here, that it should say $50 per day up to $4,800 as expenses. The way it
Okay.
reads now, it would be 50 per day and 4,800. This is, what we're talking about is the reimbursement and compensation for school board members. And the law allows for a total of $4,800 in compensation / expenses per year. And that includes $50 per meeting that you want to report, and then other activities or expenses that you have. And so we need to revise this so that it reads like the law does.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further? Seeing none, we are adjourned.